Assalamu alaikum. My presentation today will be about the great vessels of the chest. The great vessels is a collective term given to the major arteries and veins that convey blood to and away from the heart. The great vessels are the aorta, pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins, superior vena cava, and inferior vena cava. Starting with the aorta, the great artery, is the largest artery of the human body and carries oxygenated blood ejected from the left ventricle to the systemic circulation. It is divided into the thoracic aorta and abdominal aorta. It has branches from each section and gradually tapers down to its termination, where it bifurcates into the common iliac arteries anterior to the L4 vertebral body. The thoracic aorta is the most superior division of the aorta, and it is divided into three sections: ascending aorta, aortic arch, and descending aorta. The thoracic aorta begins at the aortic valve. The aortic root is a short segment of the aorta that arises from the left ventricle to include the aortic valve and the sinuses of Valsalva. The right and left coronary arteries arises from the sinuses of Valsalva. As you can see here, this is the aortic root, which consists of the leaflets of the aortic valve and the sinuses of Valsalva. This is an oblique sagittal CT image of the thoracic aorta showing the area of the aortic arch. And this is an axial CT image through the aortic root showing the right and left coronary arteries arising from the right and left sinuses of Valsalva. The ascending aorta begins at the aortic valve at the level of the lower border of the third costal cartilage. It ascends to the right and arching over the pulmonary trunk, as you can see here in the image, to lie behind the upper border of the second right costal cartilage. It normally has only two branches, the right coronary artery and the left coronary artery, that arises from the aortic sinuses of Valsalva. With the pulmonary trunk, the ascending aorta is invested in a common sheath of serous visceral pericardium anterior to the transverse pericardial sinus. Now, the relation of the ascending aorta. So to the right, the superior vena cava, to the left, the pulmonary trunk, posteriorly, the right main bronchus and the right pulmonary artery, and anteriorly is the sternum. This is the contrast enhanced axial CT image through the middle mediastinum, showing the relation of the ascending aorta to the surrounding vasculature. So as you can see here, the ascending aorta lies anteromedial to the superior vena cava and lies to the right of the main pulmonary artery and the left pulmonary artery. And here is the right pulmonary artery. It lies posterior to the superior vena cava, and this is the ascending aorta and its relation to the main pulmonary artery. Okay, next is the aortic arch. The aortic arch represents the direct continuation of the ascending aorta and represent a key area of a review of the normal variant anatomy and a wide range of pathological processes that range from congenital anomalies to traumatic injury. The aortic arch passes posteriorly from right to left to lie just left to the T4. It is anterior to the trachea and arches over the left main bronchus and main pulmonary artery. The main branches that arises from the aortic arch in order: the brachiocephalic trunk, the left common carotid artery, and left subclavian artery. The brachiocephalic trunk formed by the right common carotid artery and the right subclavian artery. This normal branching pattern found in only 65% of people. This is the contrast enhanced axial image through the aortic arch, showing the anterior segment of the aortic arch and its relation, which it lies anterior to the trachea and with the superior vena cava to the left of the superior vena cava, and this is the descending aorta. This is a three-dimensional image of the aortic arch showing the typical branching pattern, starting with the right brachiocephalic trunk, the left common carotid artery, and then the left subclavian artery. And this is also an MRI aortic angiogram showing the normal branching pattern, starting with the brachiocephalic trunk that gives the right common carotid and the right subclavian. Then we have the left common carotid and the left subclavian that gives the internal thoracic or internal mammary artery. And this is the descending aorta. This is a parasagittal thoracic MRI, also showing this is the ascending aorta, brachiocephalic trunk, the left common carotid, left subclavian, and this is the left pulmonary artery that is anterior to left main bronchus, and this is the left atrium, which is the most posterior chamber of the heart. The aortic arch variation. The most common variation of the anatomy of the aortic arch vessel is a common origin of the brachiocephalic trunk and the left common carotid artery, and called the bovine arch. It's found in 20% of people. As you can see here, we have a common origin of the left common carotid and the brachiocephalic trunk. In 2.7% of people, we have a common origin of the left subclavian and the common carotid artery to form a left-sided brachiocephalic trunk, as you can see here. This, the right common carotid seen to arise on its normal position from the standard right-sided brachiocephalic trunk. Also, an anomalous right subclavian artery is another variant where the right subclavian origin as the last of the aortic vessel and takes a retroesophageal course as it travels from the left to right. This can cause symptoms of dysphagia and can be seen on the barium swallow as persistent indentation posteriorly. We will see this later. So this is a sagittal oblique image of the chest through the aortic arch showing the bovine arch. As you can see here, the common origin of the right brachiocephalic trunk and the left common carotid, and this is the left subclavian artery. This is also a CT aortic angiogram showing the bovine arch configuration. As you can see, a common origin of the right brachiocephalic and the left common carotid artery. This is a coronal CT angio showing a common origin of the left subclavian and the left common carotid as a left-sided brachiocephalic trunk, and this gives a symmetrical appearance of the aortic branches, right side brachiocephalic and the left side brachiocephalic trunks. This is the aberrant right subclavian artery. As we said, it branches as a last from the aortic arch to pass posteriorly behind the esophagus, causing a posterior indentation. As you can see here, posterior indentation behind the esophagus. The descending aorta. It is the continuation of the aortic arch immediately distal to the left subclavian artery. At this point, the ligamentum venosum, which is a remnant of ductus arteriosus, joins the lower border of the arch to the main pulmonary artery. The aorta is fixed at this point. At the level of 12 thoracic vertebra, it passes through the diaphragm and continues as the abdominal aorta. The branches of the descending aorta, pericardial, esophageal, bronchial, and posterior intercostal. This is an oblique sagittal CT showing the descending aorta with the ligamentum arteriosum. The pulmonary trunk. The pulmonary trunk, or the main pulmonary artery, is a solitary arterial output from the right ventricle, transporting deoxygenated blood to the lung for oxygenation. The pulmonary trunk begins at the pulmonary valve. It is approximately 5 centimeters long at first and lies anterior to the aorta. As you can see here, this is the origin anterior to the aorta. It then passes posteriorly and to its left to lie in the concavity of the arch, where it bifurcates into the right and left main pulmonary arteries. The entire pulmonary tract is covered by pericardium in a common sheath with the ascending aorta. The right and left arterial appendages and the right and left coronary arteries surround the base of the pulmonary trunk. Anterior and to the left, it is in contact with the left lung and pleura. The right pulmonary artery runs horizontally and to the right, passing behind the ascending aorta. It is not shown in this picture, and superior vena cava in front of the right main bronchus, as you can see here, and it's crossed anteriorly by the right superior pulmonary vein and then drains into the left atrium. As you can see, this is the pulmonary veins. The left pulmonary artery runs to the left, anterior to the left main bronchus, and arching over this structure at tips of the upper lobe bronchus. It has slightly higher position in the chest and slightly shorter and smaller than the right pulmonary artery. It's crossed anteriorly by the left superior pulmonary vein. It is attached to the concavity of the aortic arch by the ligamentum arteriosum. So this is the level of the pulmonary trunk, given the right main pulmonary artery and the left pulmonary artery, and the relation to the superior vena cava and ascending aorta, and to the left and right main bronchi. The arterial branching pattern of the pulmonary arteries following the segmental branching pattern of the airways. So as you can see here, the right main pulmonary artery gives the right upper segmental, right middle lobe segmental, and right lower lobe segmental, where the left give the left upper lobe segmental and the left lower lobe segmental branches. The pulmonary veins drain oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left atrium. A small amount of blood is also drained from the lung by the bronchial veins. There are typically 4 pulmonary veins that draining each lung. The right superior drains the right upper and middle lobes, and the right inferior drains the right lower lobe. The left superior drains the left upper lobe, and the left interior drains the left lower lobe. The pulmonary veins course in the intersegmental septa, and as such do not run with the bronchi like the pulmonary arteries do. This is a coronal CT angio showing the origin of the pulmonary veins from the left atrium. As you can see, the right superior pulmonary vein, a right inferior pulmonary vein, and the left superior and the left inferior pulmonary vein. This is a coronal CT image of the thorax showing the right pulmonary artery, giving the right upper lobe, middle, and lower segmental branches. And this is the left pulmonary artery. This is the left atrium, given the left superior pulmonary vein. And this is the gastric fundus. This is also a coronal CT angio. This is the right pulmonary artery, given the upper, middle, and lower branches. And this is the left atrium, given the left pulmonary vein. And as you can see here, the blood in the pulmonary artery is of higher attenuation than the aorta and the subclavian artery, because it is a pulmonary angio. And this artery, this is the subclavian vein, has the highest attenuation because the contrast was injected into the left arm. The great veins. The brachiocephalic veins are formed by the union of the internal jugular and the subclavian veins at either side behind the medial end of the clavicles. On the right, the brachiocephalic run inferiorly behind the right border of the manubrium, anterolateral to the brachiocephalic artery, as you can see here. The left brachiocephalic is longer. It descends obliquely behind the manubrium, crossing the origin of the left common carotid and subclavian arteries. It is joined with the right subclavian to form the superior vena cava behind the junction of the first costal cartilage within the manubrium. This is a CT image of the chest with contrast at the inferior aspect of the right sternoclavicular articulation, showing the left brachiocephalic vein crossing anterior to the great vessels, as you can see here, to join the right brachiocephalic to form the superior vena cava. And this is a contrast CT image at the level of pulmonary trunk showing the superior vena cava and its relation to the ascending aorta that is to the right and anterior to the right pulmonary artery. Tributaries of a brachiocephalic vein. We have first is the internal thoracic or mammary vein, which drains into the inferior aspect of the brachiocephalic vein. The inferior thyroid, which arises in the thyroid gland and form a plexus anterior to the trachea. From here, the left and right vein drain into the corresponding brachiocephalic vein close to the confluence, and the left superior intercostal, which drains the left second and third posterior intercostal vein and passes obliquely down anterior to the aortic arch to drain into the left brachiocephalic vein. Superior vena cava. The superior vena cava is a large valvous venous channel formed by the union of the brachiocephalic veins. It receives blood from the upper half of the body except the heart and returns it to the right atrium. Tributaries, the azygous veins and small vein are the only tributaries of the superior vena cava. The relation to the left lateral, the aortic arch and the trachea, right lateral, the pleura, anteriorly thymus, posteriorly the azygous vein, superiorly the brachiocephalic veins, and inferiorly the pericardium and right atrium. And this is the normal CT mediastinum showing the superior vena cava and its relation. And this is the coronal image showing the superior vena cava draining into the right atrium. The inferior vena cava drains the venous blood from the lower trunk, abdomen, pelvis, and lower lips to the right atrium of the heart. The inferior vena cava is formed by the confluence of two iliac veins at the L5 vertebral level. The IVC has a retroperitoneal course within the abdominal cavity. It runs along the right side of the vertebral column with the aorta lying laterally to it on the left. The tributaries of the IVC at T8, the phrenic veins and the hepatic veins, at L1, the suprarenal and renal veins, at L2, the gonadal, from L1 to L5, the lumbar, and finally at L5, the common iliac veins. And that was the end. Thank you for your time.
أحمد خليل.
نعم أستاذ. A الليفت vertebral artery.
left vertebral. دكتور عقيل عرب.
نعم أستاذ. هاي bifurcation of left common carotid.
Bifurcation of the left common carotid. C دكتورة كيزان. دكتورة كيزان.
نعم أستاذ. C left common carotid artery.
left common carotid. دكتورة خنساء دي.
نعم أستاذ. subclavian artery left side.
left subclavian. ليندا E.
نعم أستاذ. الأرش أوف أيورتا.
الارش of the aorta. اوكي. نروح على عندك انتش كم واحد بس هاي الصورة لو بعدكم؟
لا أستاذ بعد أخي.
رنين.
نعم أستاذ. ascending aorta.
ascending. الجي رقية سعد.
نعم أستاذ. descending aorta.
شنو هذا الفحص بابا رقية؟
MRI angiography coronal view.
اي احنا MR يعني MR انجيو. MR انجيو. عايشتي شكرا جزيلا. استاذ محمد حتى تكمل.
اي عين استاذ راحت وياك.
هسه عندنا محمد مهدي.
نعم أستاذ. أي هو left internal mammary artery.
left internal mammary artery. مريم خليل.
نعم أستاذ. البي هو left anterior descending artery.
جيد. محمد فرحان. سي.
نعم أستاذ. C left atrial appendage.
نعم. زيد. دي.
نعم أستاذ. دي superior vena cava.
superior vena cava. وسالي عبد الرضا. اي.
نعم أستاذ. ascending aorta.
كل زين.
ماما
خلاص.
إيه خلاص.
دكتورة نور.